right, let's get our other Facebook groups in here before it's officially time to break down this draft class, talk about it, see what the Broncos did. Got the spinning wheels going, 1 and a 2. All right, welcome in, welcome in. It is Monday morning. Scott, it's the 1st of May. We're getting there. We're getting through the draft, and it's starting to get to the slow time. Not too many more Monday morning shows we have left. We'll probably Memorial Day will be when we'll start to come off those Monday morning shows. Makes a lot of sense in my book. But how are you doing? Good morning. Are you survived? I still feel like a shell of a human being after on air for 17 hours Thursday through Saturday, I think.
Yeah, I was thinking about y'all as I was not being on air for 17 hours. I'm like, you know what? We should probably rotate, not just like have each one of you play host and rotate out an hour at a time, so that you're doing 2 on and 1 off or whatnot, or if it's 4 of y'all or 5 of y'all or 6 of y'all. But good work, guys. I know how much work went into what you did over the weekend, and congratulations for another successful draft. And it's going to be more fun next year when you got twice as many picks.
God, you hope so. I'm afraid to even whisper that because they're going to trade away their picks, and they did trade away a 2024 third, which I'm still a little bit. I like the player they got, but I'm like, man, questions about that. But we'll see. I'm not going to cry too much about it. Maybe a little bit on air, especially if you give a super for it. Nick cry. But we got Dominique Martin coming in saying, "Morning Broncos family, MHH for life, go Broncos." We got Larry coming in saying, "Way to go, Nick and the boys, for all the great draft coverage over the weekend. I was right there with you for most of it." Well, it was a lot of fun. Not Broncos only having 2 picks in day 3 made that last one where it was like 7.5 hours pretty long, but you know what? That's okay. We didn't have to go down and like fake it till you make it. Like, oh, we took a guard out of William and Mary. Guess what? I didn't watch any William and Mary this year. So did watch every single player the Broncos took this year. Had an opinion on them. Thought they maximized the value of every single pick too. But because of the lack of draft capital, precious draft capital, some might say, the Broncos end up with a little bit lower grades on the whole. So we got Jeudy Splash coming in saying, "Scott and Nick, what is a compensatory pick and why do we have to call it a different name than regular draft pick? Thanks for your thoughts." So regular draft picks, every single team has an allotted slot of draft picks that you receive every year based on where you are picking. Compensatory is something that the league, I don't know when they first came up with compensatory picks for players, but let's say like some smaller market teams, ones that don't have the ability to pay big money. If you're getting your players signed left and right and you don't have the ability to sign them, then the league kind of wanted to reward or competitive balance those teams.
Compensate
Those teams. And you don't get like super great draft capital for it. Like let's say you give up the best player in all of football in that free agency cycle, you get the pick right after the total third round. So it'd be like pick 97. 97 overall can be valuable, but it's not like you're getting elite players for it. So you get players based on their contracts, and they just added last season compensatory picks can be added if you have minority coaches or front office people be elevated to the top spot. So if you have a minority offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator that's on your team for 2 years, go to head coach, you can get a compensatory pick. If you have somebody in the front office that's a minority get hired to a general manager spot, you get a compensatory pick, but they have to be going to the top slot position to get that. So that's why they're different. Go ahead.
And you can't sign one of those guys yourself. So it cancels it out. So basically, if you give up more free agents than you bring in, there's a chance you get a comp pick out of it.
Yes. I'm trying to think of the year. So the Broncos, when they have not been dealing in comp picks here now for a few years, which is what it is. They won't be getting any next year either. But the 2016 draft, I want to say, the Broncos had Brock Osweiler and Malik Jackson qualify for top compensatory draft picks, but because of the signing of Russell Okung, it canceled out I believe it was the Malik Jackson one. So you only had one compensatory third round pick. That ends up being Justin Simmons, which is, I just came around and said, oh, those picks, a lot of times don't hit, but sometimes they do, just like all draft picks. But that's what that's essentially the most basic explanation I can make for what a compensatory draft pick is compared to your regular draft slotting.
And you can forget about getting any this year because you were one of the big spenders in free agency.
Yep. And that you had no, like, Azure Evero was not on your team for 2 years and didn't get hired to be a head coach anywhere else. So you're not getting any comp picks for him leaving. So you're not getting any next year. Those comp picks are still valuable, especially with how expensive the undrafted free agents have become. Those guys getting more money than some of the 7th-round picks. So if you can stack your day 3 with guys that you like there, then you don't have to compete as much for those undrafted players. But it's going to be interesting to follow, see if the Broncos do end up becoming more of a compensatory team at some point. I think the Ravens and the 49ers are 2 of the best teams at it over the last 10 years, and they've been pretty damn consistently good, but that just might be overall organizational structure and their vision philosophy. But we got, go ahead. Sorry.
I wanted to hit Miguel coming in with some stars already today. Appreciate you, Miguel. He says, I wish DL would have been addressed, but okay with ending up with 6 players instead of 5. And that's one of the things. It's like I heard some of the words like ignored yesterday. I'm like, you didn't have enough picks to address everything.
Mm-hmm.
You prioritized, but that was one of the sacrifices, I guess, is the word I'm looking for, that you had to make going compromises. That's the word. One of the compromises you made going into this draft was you weren't going to be able to address every position. So, depending on how the board falls, whenever we post a mock draft, well, you didn't get this guy, this guy, this guy. I'm like, well, when I was picking at that time, I didn't like any of those players. I didn't see an edge I liked. I didn't see an interior deal I liked, but I really liked these 3 wide receivers. So I took the best one, or this cornerback. So I took the best one, or this linebacker. If where you get in trouble, and y'all have heard me say it a zillion times, Sean Payton said it, so you can listen to him, is you don't want to be in a position where you feel like you have to reach. That's where you get in trouble. Just keep taking good players and you'll be all right. So I understand, Miguel. And,
Mm-hmm.
it would have been nice if, the Broncos had gone and gotten a center earlier than the 7th round. But if you don't like those guys, don't take them. Don't take them. That kills your team.
I mean, tight end was really good day 3. Running backs available. Broncos didn't go either of those spots as well. So, yep, they weren't going to be able to fill out the entire draft with the 5 picks they had. So they got good players, I think, regardless. And one thing's like, I can't say they didn't really go after any specific positions in my book. I mean, specifically the position or the draft pick of Drew Sanders told me that, hey, we're going after value on our board, needs, schmeeds. We use the free agency to fill out needs, and what we have now probably going to have to be filled out via other methods, or we just have to have what we have. But the draft is about, especially when you only have 5 picks, I don't care what the position is. Trust your board and go get the guys that can make an impact down the road.
You could make an argument that Marvin Mims and wide receiver was a positional pick.
I mean, I think you'd have been okay this year with Sutton, Jeudy, and Tim Patrick all the same. Now, Mims is a different kind of player.
Exactly. And that's the key. He's a very different type of player. And just like the 2 tight ends that are being brought in, well, you have 2 tight ends. Yeah, but nobody that blocks. So I've brought in 2 blocking tight ends. I've got 2 pass catching tight ends, and one's not so great at catching passes either. So I could really make that argument. So my question on this, you always want to look at, as we go through the grades, because I haven't talked to you about anything about the Denver Broncos draft. We haven't talked since Friday about Denver Broncos. My question on this is, you trade up to get Marvin Mims, and I knew you were really big and high on 73 and 74. They went back to back, and I don't remember which one it is, but I thought it was Jalen Hyatt. Or was it Cedric Tillman? The 2 Tennessee wide receivers went back to back at 73 or 74.
I like them both. I mean, they're totally different types of profiles here.
Mm-hmm.
I like Tillman, but he's a pure X. So if you're looking for speed and returnability, he ain't bringing that. I liked Hyatt as well. Hyatt's a little bit, I think, less. He's more, what's the word I'm looking for? Rigid than Mims. I think Mims is a little bit more of a fluid player, where Hyatt's very vertical. And also, I think Hyatt's a much more finesse player, I guess that's how I'll put it, than Mims. Mims got a little bit more ability in his strength ability to go up and get the ball. And also, I think Mims, with the special teams ability, definitely has a better pathway to the team. And that's one thing also I take away from this. Your first 4 picks, every single one of those guys has a big pathway to play day 1, despite being, round 3, round 6 players. Special teams, every single one of these guys projects as dynamic special teams player year 1, year 2 in their league, especially that Drew Sanders pick, but also Riley Moss. Mims is a returner. Montrell Washington, it was nice to know you. Luke Wattenberg, also nice to know you probably. But I think the special teams is definitely had a lot of impact on these guys as well on their evaluation. So Michael Ronquillo coming in saying, good morning, Nick and Scott on Broncos for breakfast. Go Broncos and Buckham. Well, thank you so much for the stars, Michael. Michael came in a lot during the draft and was supportive and giving us good comments as well. So appreciate you, Michael. Hope you had a good weekend. Hope you're doing well. We had Gary coming in saying, maybe my expectations are low, but I'm happy with the class overall with no first round pick. See 4 immediate contributors on special teams with a developmental interior offensive lineman. Solid B class. Yes, exactly. And one of the things that's going to be, I think we need to have a little bit of understanding of the grades coming about the Broncos draft class is that if you're looking overall on the talent and value brought in, it is going to be lower just because you had not only low picks, but low quality picks in terms of the draft slot. But if you're looking at the players the Broncos got versus their consensus evaluation of draft slot, almost every single one of the picks the Broncos had, people had either ranked at that spot or ranked significantly higher. The ones that were potentially compared to like consensus board slight reaches were Riley Moss and Marvin Mims, each of them going about 5 to 15 picks earlier than they were projected by consensus. Doesn't mean the consensus is right, but it's still a nice little benchmark. Then you got massive values on Drew Sanders and Skinner and Forsyth. Each of those guys supposed to go for the consensus, at least, supposed to go 2 rounds higher. Now, the one with JL Skinner is that he had the pec injury. That makes things wonky. But Drew Sanders was being mocked. He never was there for a mock. And we ran random simulators, Scott, and he was never there for us round 3 because he was going round 1 or top 40 overall. Alex Forsyth was consistently going in the 5th round. JL Skinner was going in the 4th round. So to get those guys in those spots doesn't mean they're going to work out, but the consensus had them much higher.
Yeah, and Keith Brugman asked us, good morning, is Forsyth talented enough to compete with Cushenberry in your opinion? You've watched him a lot more than I have, but if I'm just looking at the paper here and I see 6'4", 303 with a 20-inch vertical and a 7-foot broad jump, that's scary. That's scary bad. As far as athleticism, a 20-inch vertical and a 7-foot, you can fall 7 feet forward. That's poor.
Yeah.
Can he be better than that? Of course. But if I'm going through a spreadsheet and I'm in a hurry, which I'm not, if I'm the Denver Broncos, this is what I do, and I've got 15 people to do this all year long, he doesn't make my list. I've got to go, like, if picture me as a college football coach, and I've got an area, and I've got 500 kids in that area, and I've got 3 days on the road, Alex Forsyth doesn't get a visit based on those numbers. We talk about the minimum. Do you have the enough factor? Now, as I'm on the road, and I'm going to ask some questions, and people are going to say, you need to check him out. He's a lot better than that. And that's what I need to know, Nick, because Forsyth on paper is an undraftable player.
And he was the 3rd to last pick in the entire draft. Mm-hmm. So essentially, you're making a priority undrafted free agent there. But a lot of people believe he kind of flubbed the draft process because he bowed out of the Senior Bowl and then did the testing. Everyone's like, no. You're a much better football player than you are tester. It should have been the opposite to begin with. Whoever was giving you advice was not a good one. Now, granted, one of those people was Jim Nagy, and he's a little bit biased towards everybody should be in the Senior Bowl. So always take that, slant with that as well. But I think it was also Jeff Schwartz. Yeah, and so do we. So does everybody. Mm-hmm. But Irwin agenda helping us out here. That's the agenda, saying, good morning, guys. Love what the Broncos did with the draft. Wanted more offensive line help. Go Broncos. Well, at least they did bring in one, and they spent huge money in free agency to improve the offensive line. We said from the beginning, Scott, that the offensive line overturn was probably going to take multiple years to get it in that vision, and Broncos made a huge dent on it this season. We'll see what happens next season with the center position. We'll see what happens with Quinn Minor's development. We'll also see what happens with Garrett Bowles. But offensive line, I feel like that's been a huge emphasis for this team. Even though they didn't walk away with one early, you have to feel much better about the identity and the players that they have lined up there. So I don't disagree, Irwin, but I also feel much better about it.
And it looked like, Irwin, thank you so much. I know you've come in huge recently, making a big splash. I think last month was Irwin's first super chat, and he finished top 10 and is in a chance for the running for the jersey this month. So again, this helps us more than you would know, more than you can know. So thank you so much. And Irwin, I want to address this, and I want to hit this with Nick too, because one of the guys that fell dramatically from where he was on the PFF whenever we were doing the rankings. And Nick was right. He's like, I just don't like this guy. I don't like him. I don't like him. I don't like him. Was Luke Weipler. Weipler fell to the 6th. One of the guys you really liked, who was down in the 6th or 7th, went in the 3rd. So they switched positions, and that was Ricky Stromberg. So as the board falls, as you look at these picks, John Michael Schmitz went in the 2nd, and Joe Tippmann went in the 2nd. Those were 2 of the top guys right away. They were off the board for you. Now they went pick 12 and 26. So you might have been able to trade up to get John Michael Schmitz instead of Marvin Mims.
My understanding is there was at least some discussion of that being happening. Some feelers out there for John Michael Schmitz as he fell, but unfortunately what Denver was willing to give up did not match what teams wanted some of these players too much to give up the spots the Broncos did. So the Broncos definitely, I think they had some interest in John Michael Schmitz when he fell, and
they explored it. Thank you.
Out.
And it didn't work out. He wasn't available when they picked, and he was too expensive to go back up and get. Ricky Stromberg in the 3rd was an option. You went, if I'm not mistaken, you went linebacker instead.
And cornerback.
At that point, and cornerback. 83 versus Stromberg was picked 34. So yeah, you took 2 guys ahead of Stromberg. Okay, maybe Stromberg wasn't high enough on your board. I'll tell you what, though. The Indianapolis Colts signed Ekiyor as an undrafted free agent. I would have been all over that one, man. Emil Ekiyor, I would have been whatever. I would have been like, I would have. What was the movie? Tom Hanks, The Firm. It says, well, we took your best offer and put 33% on it. That's what I would have done with Ekiyor to bring him in at center for the for the Broncos.
Yeah, again, everything hindsight here on this one. I had heard that he wasn't super impressive on whiteboards and some of that recall stuff, which for the center position really matters. It's kind of like linebacker and safety. It's a head up position. I think maybe even more than any spot. You can have a mediocre athlete out there.
It is. It's a quarterback. It's a quarterback of the offensive line, and I joked about it. I said centers are guards with good grades,
but lesser athletes
and
less
shorter
power.
arms usually.
Yeah,
it's like, well, he's not quite, his arms aren't quite long enough to play guard. Let's put him at center, and he's smart. He's a center.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, you talk about Ben Jones a lot being an awkward guy, but his goes out there and does some good stuff, but also the intelligence, the toughness. And it was Jeff Schwartz also talked about Alex Forsyth being, and he's an Oregon alum, has tapped into the offensive line there pretty well, saying shocked that he fell this far. One of his favorite players in the draft, I think, Emery Hunt, had Alex, and he's he does his own work. He's definitely not influenced by outside influence, so sometimes his grades are different than a lot of other people, but he had Alex Forsyth as his number 1 center in the entire class because of the intelligence and the leadership of what he'd heard there. One of the more brilliant players out there and was a big time leader for that Oregon team. So for where the Broncos took him, I also played some guard and right guard spots. I think that, that's a great pick because it's just essentially an undrafted free agent who's going to come in and compete and provide some depth.
Complete low risk. Low risk. The question is the opportunity of, is the question that Keith asked right off the bat, is he good enough to come in and compete? I don't know. They think he probably is. And can you get by? Can you hide or expect improvement from Cushenberry enough to not tank your offense again? Gary Palmer, always keeping us afloat. He's not tanking anything. He says, more Nick and Scott. I hate the Seahawks, but get it. Otherwise, I like the draft. Give it a B. Yeah, that's behind you now, which will help. I think there's a swap of picks next year, and you lost a 3rd. But
to the Seahawks.
Was it to the Seahawks?
God bless it.
I didn't see who they traded it to.
Yeah,
so they got Troutman from the Seahawks?
No. So when they traded up for Riley Moss, they gave up pick 108 to the Seahawks, and then whichever 3rd next year is the lowest one. So to go up and get Riley Moss. So they gave up a top 100 pick and pick 108, who ended up being Bradford, the guard from LSU, who we liked quite a bit as a guard for this scheme. But after he paid Ben Powers, it didn't make as much sense. But no, the Seahawks own whichever pick is the latest between the Saints and the Broncos next season.
Yeah, you'll be ready. You'll be happy to be done with them, and that might not happen until Russell Wilson's gone. And you're hoping that's not for like 6 years, because that means Russell Wilson has hit, and then you can cut those ties. So if the ties are cut next year with the Seattle Seahawks, things have gone badly. If you've got Russell Wilson for the next 6 years or so, things are going to be good. Yeah, no doubt. We got Shiloh
Heesh coming in here, $5 with the beautiful golden retriever pupper there. Or excuse me, German Shepherd. What am I saying? That's more Scott's side there. On the German Shepherd side, it says, with a lot of agreements on this channel, there were some names I was disappointed we didn't get when we could have, namely Zach Harrison and Luke Weipler. Well, Zach Harrison went to the Falcons, so I don't feel too bad about that. So I can continue to watch him. And Broncos end up getting different players in those slots, so it makes some sense where they got him. Luke Weipler, I liked Luke Weipler. I'd have been fine with him, even in the late 4th, early 5th, and he fell to the 6th. So even though he fell farther, like people saying the Broncos should take him early 3rd, I didn't see that one. I was like, oh man, let's punt on that one, please. I don't want to be, rude or anything. I know PFF had him high, but I'm like, I did not see it with him. Also, as high as I was on Ricky Stromberg, I didn't see him as a top 100 pick. I thought he was, top, 130 to like 110 range, early 4th round kind of guy. But that's how the draft goes sometimes. And these teams are dealing with personalities and culture fits and what makes sense with the interpersonal stuff as much as some of the tape. So maybe there's some stuff going on there too. But I like Zach Harrison, Luke Weipler a good bit. Zach Harrison to the Falcons, Luke Weipler to the Browns. Yeah, we'll follow their careers and see what happens with them.
Yeah, and Shiloh, you can follow us. We'll be talking plenty of Zach Harrison. You end up being like us, where you root for the names on the back instead of the names on the front. And you can be a Zach Harrison fan over on our my channel when we talk Falcons twice a week. Miguel comes in. He says, I think the Mims pick was great. And thanks for coming with the stars again, Miguel. He says, they needed the deep threat. I didn't see it coming. Got me excited for this year. Yeah, a 4.38 guy who has the wiggle that he does and the history of being able to stay on the field, knock on wood, without the injuries. You should be excited. He brings something different. The question is, man hurts. Does Troutman, are they pushing out Dulcich and Okwebanam? I'm like, well, Okwebanam maybe, because you can only carry so many guys, but they do different things. They play different positions for the most part. And yeah, Mims is a wide receiver, but he's different. He plays a different position than Patrick and Sutton. He's closer to Jeudy. I can put 4 wide receivers on the field pretty easy, no problem. And I'm rotating them in all the time. So Mims on the field with that 4.3 speed is exciting. You should be excited, Miguel. I'm excited for you.
Yeah, Mims, good player, also exceedingly young. Still at the position. I think he's just turned 21 or will be 21. I'm curious to see if he can add any more mass to his frame. That's something where I think he can get pushed off his routes pretty easily with that smaller frame. I think he's smooth and technical with his ability to get off press, but until he needs to get stronger, if that's possible. Trading up, I hope he's not a pure slot player. I hope he can at least do enough with press where he can play some Z as well, because if you want to be a run-oriented team, your slot has to be able to block sometimes. And for his frame, he's a decent blocker, but want to be able to go with some different body types out there, some versatility. But we'll see. We're going to continue to follow it. And Mims is going to be a fun player, somebody that really stood out the combine. I thought he was incredible in the gauntlet drill. The highlights that he has are great. Sometimes some concentration drops. There's a reason he fell to the last pick of the 2nd round still, but a fun player. And again, maybe he's going to kick out and be your punt returner this year, which I think Sean Payton said in the post-draft press conference that he was one of the 2 highest graded punt returners they had in this draft class. So another avenues to make impact, and hopefully the Broncos start to close the gap on the special teams around the league, where they've had one of the worst special teams the last 5 years running. I mean, it's been dreadful. Elliot Sean coming in saying, good morning from Page, Arizona. Of our 2023 picks, what do you think makes the biggest impact this season? This is a good question. The impact this season.
Sean Payton.
Yeah, God, that's a good one. He was your pick.
I had a chance to read this because I was pulling it up, so I'll let you breathe on it for just a second. And I just sang the praises of Marvin Mims, especially if he ends up being a return guy as well. Again, you're talking 4.3 speed with wiggle. You can find plenty of ways to get him on the field. Drew Sanders, and then again, going across the starting 22, safety is a concern. So if JL Skinner fell because of an injury and he should have been higher, 3rd, 4th round guy, you can find a place for a 3rd, 4th round guy on this team right now as he goes in and pushes, especially with his physical ability, his size and strength, to go in and bring some thump to this defense coming out of the defensive backfield. So, I think Skinner would be a good shout as well. But there's all of these guys have a chance to come in and compete for a lot of time on the 2 deep.
I think the obvious answer is Mims, just because outside of KJ Hamler, who you can't trust, you have no players of that skill set, and the fact that Sean Payton identified him, traded up for him, and has done so well with his skill position players over his career as an offensive coordinator and offensive head coach, that Mims is the one that makes the most sense here. I think that there's a chance though for Riley Moss as well. The Broncos, they gave up a lot for him. They had to have loved him. They said in the post draft press conference they did as much work on Riley Mims as any single player in the entire, or excuse me, Riley Moss as any player in the entire draft, and they view him as a cornerback. So Damari Mathis was good last year. I really like Damari Mathis as well, but he's still enough of a question mark where he has to compete. There's a chance where Riley Moss is your starting cornerback opposite of Surtain this upcoming season. So I think that there's a good chance for Moss as well.
I love this question, and every once in a while when I switch tabs now on StreamYard, it puts me on pause, so apologies, and then it speeds up like you're fast forwarding old
It wasn't
tapes. So apologies, but I love this question from Keith, and I want to see if you guys remember what you were saying live at the time, because I'm sure you were live doing it when the trade was made. When the Broncos' first trade was announced, where they were trading up in the second round, who did you think they were moving up to take? Did you guys discuss options here? Because I think Zach Harrison would have been a decent shout. There weren't really any centers out there that were still like, oh, this is where you get the center. Probably not. Because I looked at who was available, and nobody really jumped out to me. You got the next 10 picks: Zach Pickens, Tyler Steen, Sidney Brown, safety; Hendon Hooker, quarterback; Tank Dell, wide receiver; Byron Young, defensive tackle from Alabama. Running back, Garrett Williams, Jalen Hyatt, Cedric Tillman, Zach Harrison were the next 12 or so picks. I don't think there would have been an obvious answer right there.
I mentioned the tight ends there after Luke Schoonmaker came off the board late in the second that like, you really wanted to come out with a tight end. Maybe you're trading up for Darnell Washington or Tucker Kraft. Obviously, Darnell Washington falls to the late third. Apparently, there's a foot issue that has a lot of teams very concerned about his long-term health. And then Tucker Kraft goes middle of the third. So I was naming tight ends potentially there at that spot as a possible move for the Broncos. Other than that, though, I was kind of shocked that they traded up with how the board had fallen. Wasn't sure. I think we also named a Devon Achane as somebody with how running backs were valued there, looking to get some explosiveness and some speed. Achane goes one pick after the Broncos take Riley Moss to the Miami Dolphins. God, the Miami Dolphins are the fastest team in the history of the NFL. Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, and Devon Achane. But yeah, it's going to be, I think I was naming Tucker Kraft, Achane, and Darnell Washington as the names that I was intrigued by.
Mims surprised you a little bit when his name was read.
Yes. Yeah, I did not think the Broncos, especially with the amount of wide receivers in that kind of mold still available, which makes you question, like, was it the best usage of value, but also make you think like, okay, they viewed Mims differently than these other guys because he's still had highlight out there.
Which goes back to our original discussion that, yes, I think that was a targeted pick at wide receiver. I think they said we in this group of players that's available, the wide receiver is where we can help the most. Like I said, center probably would have been a higher option, but there wasn't the guy you wanted there. Do not reach. Do not take a guy you don't want. It sounds simple, right?
Yep.
If you don't like him, hey, don't take him. Sounds easy enough, but in soccer they say sometimes the hardest thing to do is to play simple.
Yep.
And to panic. So again, we should put that on a hashtag. If you don't like him, don't take him. There you go. It seems easy enough. Troy, like Irwin, made his first super chat last month and jumped into the top 10. So Troy has been huge for this show and what we've been able to do over the course of the last month. And he's taking it into May. And to that, we salute you and say thank you very much, Troy. Says if we sign Fleming, offensive tackle Cam Fleming, and maybe Shelby Harris on the DL, one more running back, maybe Kareem Hunt, then I feel good going into the season and very good from the perspective of free agency. And then it all kind of boils down to, you've built the pieces around Nick. So what's the big question going into the season?
Is Russell Wilson the guy?
Is Russell Wilson the guy?
Yeah, or still the guy?
Yeah. Can he be a plus quarterback in this league? That becomes the big question. That's okay. Because that's the one thing you really can't do anything about right now. So you've got to do everything in your power to build up the team around something I cannot control based on previous events, which is that gigantic contract.
Yep.
So I agree with you, Troy. And you've got to think that there's a drop off. There's a decline. It's usually not off the cliff for anybody that isn't injury related. So with the roster, the additions, the free agency, and the coaching staff, you should be more excited. Plus, the bar's been set so low, there's nowhere to go but up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's they should be better this year, just more confident. Injury luck too, another one. So hopefully the Broncos are in for some positive regression this season. But every year is a reset. No gambler's fallacy here. What happened last year, the odds of last year doesn't impact the odds of this year. It's just a reset of the dice roll. But on this list, I think I would be totally fine if Shelby Harris came in. But I think from a team building philosophy, just kind of a standpoint on that maybe you want to see what Awuzurike and Henningsen can do before you target those defensive linemen in free agency. Maybe it's something that's it's a post 90 to 53 roster cut situation to peruse the defensive linemen, see what those professional talent evaluators, the NFL guys in your front office talent acquisition people are looking for the defensive line there. But I think Fleming, you have to bring in another tackle. I mean, you go through the names on the depth chart at offensive tackle, and it is, Scott and I watch a lot of football, and we know a lot of these names. We have to. And I kid you not, like the 3 of the 4 backup offensive tackles they have, I couldn't tell you anything about them. And we watch a lot of football, Scott. The fact that
the list of UDFAs. What do you think about these guys, man? I've only heard of one of those 15 guys. I don't even know where 4 of those schools are.
Yeah, Thomas Incoom. That's my favorite, but I think we talked about on
I do know him.
Okay,
yeah,
they brought him
Super Bowl guy. I like Thomas Incoom.
Broncos brought him in. Thomas Incoom, edge rusher, 6'2", 260, Central Michigan. I thought he was pretty good.
4'6" guy. I like Thomas Incoom.
Bronco.
You mentioned the 90s. Zach Powers had a question earlier I wanted to get to. Could we see some cuts? Not right now. You're allowed to take 90 into the summer, and then you have to cut down to like 88, 85, and then like to 53. Then there's the big cut. There's a couple smaller cuts, and then the big one. You usually sign almost exclusively from that group 16 practice squad guys. We like to talk about, let's look over for these guys. Let's look over for these guys at this team. Who else is getting cut? Those usually happen sooner. There's a few guys that will switch teams, but you almost sign your 16 practice squads almost exclusively from the guys that were already in camp with you. So that was the answer to that question, Zach. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Troy also came in a lot during the draft with some questions in Super Chat. So we appreciate you hanging out with us. Got Albert Knoppers coming in from the across the pond and out there in the Netherlands. Hope you're doing well. Saying good morning, Nick and Scott. I really like the pick of JL Skinner. Overall, Broncos did great. My grade would be an A- overall. I gave the Broncos a solid B. I thought that the selection of Mims and Moss were just slightly over my evaluation. Now, if you love the guys, I'm not working with all the information, then, that's fine. But I think the Broncos mainly lost out in this draft class from some of the trades they gave up. So the Broncos trading specifically that trade of going up to get Moss, they gave up 108 and a 2024 third round pick. Well, at 108, you could have had Adebaware out there, another defensive line inside-outside guy. He goes like 110 or 115 or something. Could have had him or one of those running backs that you were really questioning right now what the position is there with just Samaje Perine as like your only known healthy quantity out there. That's concerning. And then giving up that future third as well. If I was in charge of the draft, as much as I like Mims, I think you possibly could have stayed there at 67, 68 and taken Sanders because he fell. That's my favorite pick of the whole draft. And then traded down from 68 and gotten Moss still. And then instead of giving away future draft capital, added future draft capital or added more day 3 picks. But that's not the Sean Payton way. That's the George Payton way. Got to say, I kind of align with Sean Payton in some of the team building asset accumulation.
George Payton.
Excuse me. What did I say?
You said Sean. And since you said, since they're both Paytons, we got to be clear on this. Nick aligns with George Payton on this, on having more shots.
Yeah. Especially in like the top 120. So the fact that you gave up 2 top 120 picks to get 1 top 120 pick, I don't love that process, but if Moss hits, then it doesn't matter. But
and you don't know how it's going to be. But Ade going at 110 when you had pick 108, that one hurts a little bit. I know how you feel about Rashawn Johnson. The running back goes to the Bears just a few picks later. Clark Phillips is a good corner from Utah. Would have fit right there in the Mountain West. Would have stayed. But again, That's 3 players. John Gaines was a guy that I liked as a developmental guy. He went a little higher than was expected. But we'd take him in the 7th, be like, yeah, I'm taking, you want to talk about athletes in the position. We mentioned Forsyth, not an athlete. John Gaines, phenomenal athlete, not a great football player. That's why they fall. How fall do they do? You've got this scale. Athleticism and production puts you at the very top. Production and athleticism, teams will generally bet on the athleticism first because they believe that they can coach the skills into you, because it's not an overly skilled game. This isn't hitting a curveball. This isn't playing shortstop. This isn't what are your post moves like? It's, can you run faster and hit this guy harder than he can hit you?
Yeah. Yep, without a doubt. We got Gary Fire coming in saying, go Broncos. I thought the Troutman trade was excessive. What's the problem with Albert Okwuegbunam? How come do coaches dislike him so much? Albert Okwuegbunam is a super finesse player playing in a 6'5", 260-pound frame. And the Broncos, with their style of, if you're a tight end, you cannot be a tendency breaker. And if you are a tight end and when you go out on the field, it tells you that they're going to be passing the football, that is unacceptable. You have to be at least able to go out there and get in the way and do some blocking stuff. I think there was early on last season, it was 100% of the time if Albert Okwuegbunam took the field, it was going to be a pass. I mean, there's no point of play action. There's no point of anything. You might as well just go up there and
punters
tell them
aren't even that predictable.
Yeah.
1 out of 100, they'll fake.
Yeah. Also, for what he does, he's a really good straight line down the field athlete. I don't think he's always the best at adjusting to the football, but he kind of turns like a battleship. I think because of the mass he has and with how high he plays in and out of his breaks, he's just super curved off on how he can create space. He's not super sudden in that regard. So, honestly, I wish if he was more physical, maybe get some more value out of him in different areas of the field, even on special teams. But because of the lack of physicality, he just has some issues out there. So I don't think he's super valued. He's a 4th round pick, 5th round pick, whatever he was. Yeah, this is now be his 4th year in the league, I believe. Just has not worked out for him. Not a total bust. I mean, he's still here, right? And he was a day 3 pick, but I don't think that this is now 3 different regimes that haven't gone out of their way to get him on the field.
If you listen to the 2 acquisitions of the tight ends, this is basically all I hear when I'm listening to Sean Payton talk about it, because he'll go on for 4 minutes and really not say anything. He's amazing at it. I'm going to try and keep this quick, and then he doesn't at all. All I hear from him is block, 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 blocker, blocking, blocking, block, 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 blocker. You don't have that guy on your roster. It wasn't Dulcich, and it dang sure wasn't Albert Okwuegbunam. And even when Albert O had a nice game to close out the season last year, my God, he was fighting the ball. It was, he get in, he's wide open, he catches it. Yeah, he's got 60 yards, 30 catches, 60 yards and a touchdown. Oh man, he made it look like work. So I get it. I do. And these are different positions that they're bringing in. These are tight ends that are brought in to continue running the ball and pound the rock. And that ain't Alberto. And it's not a strength of Greg Dulcich.
Yeah. Without a doubt. Did want to get to this by Lawrence Rivera, asking if we talked about Shaquille Barrett already. Shout out to Shaquille Barrett and his family. Thoughts and prayers for him. If you guys didn't hear the news, he tragedy in the Barrett family. 2-year-old daughter drowned in their home pool and passed away. So unbelievably tragic. I can't even imagine. And thoughts and prayers. They're not action, but that's definitely thinking about him and his family, and just what a tragedy. Just absolutely unspeakable tragedy for them.
Yep.
So,
I want to move on. It's tough to even talk about, man. It just is. It helps. Yep. It's a reminder of the things that you think are bothering you in the day. They just don't matter.
No,
they just don't. It'll be all right.
Yep. And JB Wright coming in saying, I don't care what the experts say, because we have our high praise rookie classes done for us for the last few years. Yeah, I mean, draft classes, the one thing you can tell about draft classes, and we grade these things and everything like that, but like, how much do they matter, especially year one at the end of the day? Typically, after a draft class happens, you know how much teams over and unders change in Vegas? They don't. They stay the exact same most of the time, unless you bring in like an unbelievable quarterback prospect, or like you make a big trade for a player during the draft. Like last year when the Eagles brought in AJ Brown, I think they added 1.5 wins or something to their Vegas over under. Then you see the line shift a bit, but these are darts. There's no guarantees. So typically you don't
Sounds
take
like a pretty good argument that a late first round pick probably isn't worth holding on to when you have a chance at a superior coach. I think you just made that argument. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, year one especially. Maybe
Mhm.
not year 3, 4,
All right.
but
Well, we can go back with the Broncos and we can go
oh
back how
yeah,
many years you want to go. And you tell me which of those guys was worth Sean Payton.
probably
I'll
not
wait.
many. Well,
I'll wait. John
let's see
Elway. That's about it.
let's see how Sean Payton does first too. Also, because also still not a guarantee there, especially in a division when he has Russell Wilson compared to Herbert and Mahomes. But I digress. I did want to get into the experts here. What the Athletic Dane Brugler ranked the Broncos class, and he has them 26 overall. Now, I do want to add. I think I said at the beginning of the show again. He ranked them 26 because of the value of the picks they had and the volume of the picks they had. It was going to be hard for them to rank outside of the bottom three because they came in with the second lowest value in terms of draft capital in this draft class. So actually, I would say they actually overhit a little bit compared to what they had coming in. He ranks them higher than the Kansas City Chiefs. He ranks them higher than the Los Angeles Rams, who had like 40 picks on their team. Ranks them higher than the New York Jets. Ranks them higher than the Miami Dolphins and the Minnesota Vikings and the San Francisco 49ers. So 26 on the surface looks bad, but when you're considering how small the Broncos class was and the fact that they only had their first pick was 63, I mean that's okay in my opinion.
Yeah,
And
real quick, Nick.
yeah,
It's again, it's quantity and quality. So you're basically when you're trying to grade these classes, yeah, you want to try and say, do they fit their needs too? But you that's part of it. But you also, because I did this for so long, and you're trying to
mhm,
balance this stuff out. But basically, you're saying, which draft class do I want? If I'm building a team, which one do I want? I'm building it from scratch. I'm in a complete vacuum. Which one do I want?
yep,
And I start at one and say, these are the group of players I would want first. I might take the Colts. They had 12 freaking picks.
yeah,
But that gets into the balance of quantity versus quality.
yep,
Um, and when your first pick was 63 overall, you're not going to win that very often. You're just not.
no, nope. I think my favorite draft might have been the Steelers, but that's just because they went for identity guys, in my opinion, with Keanu Benton, Broderick Jones, and Darnell Washington, and Joey Porter Jr. I mean, that's God bless. I loved what the Steelers did, but
I'm a closet Steelers fan. I think just because of Mike Tomlin. Love
I
I
think
love that dude.
I have to be because the Hawkeyes stole their uniform concept. That's Hayden Fry came in and said, "Who's the best team in the NFL? The Steelers. We're going to dress like them." But yeah, that's not a bad team to emulate, and I thought they had a really good draft. But I digress. Getting back into Dane Brugler and the Athletic ranking the Broncos, his favorite pick and one of his favorite players in the entire draft was Drew Sanders. He says, "My top-ranked linebacker in the entire class. Sanders has intriguing versatility as a do-everything front seven defender." Long, lean, fast, and he has instincts and range. Although he has to become better as a take-on player and clean up his almost plays on tape. Nevertheless, landing Sanders at pick 67 is an absolute steal. So you know how much I love Jack Campbell, Scott, and I was a huge proponent of if Jack Campbell's there, I wouldn't have any issue trading up for him. But 18 overall, again, unbelievable dude. I think there's almost no way that he's a bust in the league, but 18 was shocking to me. I thought he was somebody who was going to go 25 to 50, kind of that range. I mean, 25 being very high for him. But he ends up going there. And then Broncos sit there and wait, and they bring in a linebacker who I don't know if you listened to the Sean Payton press conference, but they designated him as a pressure player. So somebody who they can use to be aggressive and get after the quarterback. He says he is going to be I think he even used the phrase off ball linebacker, Scott, in the press conference.
I heard it
But
say inside too. I'm like, thank you.
I think he did say inside, actually. He talked about it being a mic. But somebody who can be a pressure player, and they wait until pick 67 to take him, the second linebacker off the board. I definitely come off as an anti-linebacker person. I don't think they're typically worth first-round picks, but 67 overall, if you can get arguably the best linebacker in the class, 67 overall, that's where you should be taking your linebacker. So to get somebody like that this far down, my favorite pick in the class by far. They did a good job, and this was also the pick that emphasized to me they didn't give a hoot about the day one impact or where the roster was at right now. We talked a lot in the draft saying what was one position they could probably get around and not need at all. It was linebacker probably, and they end up using one of their premium picks
Mhm.
at linebacker, and that just goes to show to me it's about the value and it's about how much they liked Drew Sanders as well.
Looking at the Saints, they had a linebacker last year named Caden Ellis who had 7 sacks in 11 games, and the profile is very similar. 6'4", 235. He'll play 250 in the next couple of years. sub 4.6 speed. You can use him all over the place, and be multiple with him. So a very interesting pick. No, this one makes the DWI guys Ethan happy, who also comes in with some news. Says Drew Sanders, thank you for a linebacker with that type of athletic and instincts, because Jonas Griffith fits that profile, but he wasn't coming off playing SEC football for 3 years. He was kind of late to the game, so to speak, and needs some help, and then stay healthy, kid. He says also Latavius Murray just signed with the Bills. Good spot for him. That's a great spot for him. That's a veteran. We saw what he did with the Broncos just to settle things down, and he's a guy I want on my team just for what he brings off the field as well.
Yeah. So congrats to Latavius Murray for getting signed. And yeah, Drew Sanders, I think I gave you a couple shout outs when that pick came through, Ethan. So I was happy about that one.
This was a joke. I'm sorry. Real quick. I said this one is a joke. I'm going to start calling the fullback an off-ball tight end as a joke, just because that's the way things are going. Glad I finished that water.
Yeah.
Sean Payton did mention off-ball tight end. Those are called fullbacks. I'm becoming annoyed with it just as much as Scott. The lingo feels like posturing.
I think the off-ball tight end he was mentioning was somebody who could move out to the slot.
I know. Or, I think he said offline. An H-back. We've called those guys H-backs forever.
Yeah. I think he was talking more about Fs, but I still doesn't matter. Yeah, you're not your classic inline guy. Somebody like Dulcich is kind of more of an F tight end. But anyway, the Drew Sanders pick, he was my favorite pick of the entire draft for the Broncos. One that also hammered home to me that they are very much going about value. Could they have reached on a center there, or reached on a running back, or somebody who had much more immediate path to the field than Drew Sanders, who's probably your linebacker 3 entering the season with some ability to play in some sub packages? Yes, but this gives you a chance for a pressure player, somebody can get up to the quarterback in this upcoming season. I think you probably roll with Singleton and Jewell this year, because as Dane mentioned here, and it's something that I saw a lot in Drew Sanders tape, he has a lot of issues right now in terms of tackling technique, and as well as the ability to take on and shed blockers. Now, last year was his first year as a middle linebacker. He was an edge rusher before that. So I think he's somebody who, some of the more finer skills of the linebacker spot, he's going to have to work on those some, but he's going to see the field still. You're going to see a rotation, and especially in those pressure packages where you want him to line up as a mug linebacker over the A gap or B gap, being a part of a chess piece weapon for a more blitzing front, can be out there. So I think you're going to see all 3 of those guys rotated throughout that. And the biggest impact he's going to make this season, in my opinion, is special teams. They screamed about him on special teams, a core 4 player, being the athlete that he is, the size that he is. He's somebody who's going to play punt return, kick return, punt coverage, kick coverage throughout the entire season. A big player in that regard.
And what a great way to just kind of get your feet wet. When you played, I don't know, the first time I walked out on a varsity soccer field as a freshman, the field seemed like it was 20 miles long. It was like everything was so huge, and it just, the perspective was, and then as you get used to it, whether it's playing, just making a little cameo on special teams, everything slows down for you, and that experience could be very important for him as he moves forward. Because God, the way the injuries have happened at the Broncos linebacker court, you might need him sooner rather than later. Austin has a good question here. He says, any surprise trade or cut candidates, especially since we drafted a wide receiver and linebacker? I don't know that the wide receivers, nothing would surprise me at this point. Is Hamler, would it be a surprise if Hamler wasn't on the roster next year? No. So I start thinking, when you say wide receiver, Austin, I think special teams as well. How long is Montrell Washington for this world? Luke Wattenberg, when you take a safety, he was a 6th round pick, I believe. Who is he a guy who could only be 1 year on the team? But those are 2 I would look at that are just in their 2nd year of after being drafted, that could be looking for work shortly.
Yeah, without a doubt. And just a little bit more about Drew Sanders. I think he's going to be very much a point and shoot kind of player early on. I see Adam Sears coming in. I saw Adam also mention earlier, who was your favorite undrafted free agent? I didn't grab it when it was up there, but I gave you a shout out there with the Thomas Incoom from Central Michigan pick there. So he's my favorite undrafted free agent, but I don't see Drew Sanders as a Luke Kuechly. Luke Kuechly is not a significantly better athlete, but a much better athlete still than him. And he was so fluid going backwards and reading plays and coverage that I don't see that from Sanders just yet. Sanders is right now, I view more of a point and shoot kind of player. And he's somebody who's going to bring you some sideline to sideline athleticism and blitzing a lot athleticism. It's going to be like that cone forward versus that cone backwards in terms of his spheres of influence early on. But I went on a Ravens show last year where they asked me, like, a lot of teams have been spying Lamar Jackson then with a linebacker to chase him down. Who would the Broncos use in that role? I'm like, nobody. They don't have anybody who makes any sense in that kind of role because they don't have the gap closing pursuit player in that kind of position. If you're using Josie Jewell, Alex Singleton to impact the pass rush, you better do it to start the snap because if they're going to try to close the angles after that, it's not going to happen. But with somebody like a Drew Sanders, now you have somebody who can do a little bit of those, second level looping, delayed blitzes that can still impact that, especially with a slippery little, like Patrick Mahomes escaping the pocket. Now, if you have Sanders chasing him as that second level pass rusher, now it makes some sense. You can be a little bit concerned about trying to escape the pocket because he will hunt you down. But I don't see him as a Drew Sanders. The player that Sean Payton compared him to was Demario Davis. Scott also did a good job shouting out Caden Ellis. Second level linebackers who are used a lot in pressure packages on third down to influence the blitz. So I think that's he's a good player. One my favorite of the entire draft.
Yeah, and there's more than just height, weight, and speed that make these guys who they are. Luke, there's lots of guys that are 6'4", 240 pounds that just don't play like Luke Kuechly. Kuechly's instincts were second level. If I look up Mike Singletary's height, weight, and speed, it's going to be a zillion guys like that. But what do they do to make themselves special? Is what makes them special. They just see the game faster than everybody else. And I don't think you can say that about Sanders just yet. I mean, Jonas Griffith, I mentioned him earlier. He's got all these same traits, and he's not the player that even Sanders was, let alone a Kuechly. Just because the instincts it matters so much. Let me see. DWI guys, Ethan coming back in. Thank you, sir. Double dipping for the day. Coming down to the end here on fifth-year options. That's today, isn't it? In the deadline today. So Denver has today. There you go. To make a decision on Jerry Jeudy. The decision's already been made. So when do we hear it? Or not hear it? At the deadline?
Today. No, it'll come out unless something shocking happens where you get like a 2024 first round pick for Jerry Jeudy. But I think it's going to come down today.
You wouldn't hear, like, it would be a confirmation by a negative. We didn't hear it, so they didn't exercise it.
I think we'd hear an
announcement that they didn't.
I think there'd be an announcement that they didn't from somebody out there, like a list of players that didn't have it. But yeah, Jerry Jeudy, I mean, you say what you will about him, but we'll see how it plays out. Did want to get to this last bit about from Dane Brugler here saying the day 3 pick who could surprise, and he wrote Alex Forsyth. He wrote in here that graded as the top center in the class by many scouts. Forsyth had bad injury luck throughout the draft process, which allowed Denver to nab him in the final round. Though not overpowering, he is technically sound and plays with grit required at the pro level. The long-term outlook at center for Broncos is far from settled, so Forsyth is a legitimate chance to move his way up the depth chart as soon as this season. So a lot of people liked Forsyth. Again, his draft process went about as poor as possible. I thought his tape looked like a 5th round kind of guy, mid-5th round kind of player out there. Then to get him with the 3rd to last pick in the entire draft. Granted, he tested horribly. He probably should have been out there at the Senior Bowl, and the injury luck explains a lot of it too. But a lot of people, he was like one of the biggest leaders on that Oregon team, been there for a number of years. So I'm excited to see what Forsyth can do. I think the bell doth toll for Luke Wattenberg out there in Denver with this kind of pick going on.
Yeah, I think tested horribly is the way you can say it. There's got to be more to it than what you see. Who's a guy that we've talked about that you've heard me say before, and he ended up playing center, Nick. Walked up all knobbly-kneed, round, dough-faced guy, and people would be like, who's this guy? And all he did was just whip everybody's ass for 15 years. From college was Ben Jones. Was a kid from Alabama who looked like nothing, tested like nothing. You line up anybody in front of him, and he whipped them. Maybe that's what you're looking at. Again, you can't always judge a book by these numbers. And when you've got enough chances, a 7th round, if you like what you saw, F the testing.
Yep. Especially with that late. The first round, you don't want to F the testing, but there becomes a
Ben
point.
Jones, and I'm going 3rd or 4th, but when he showed up for the combine, a lot of the guys I work with are there. And they're like, this guy, really? I'm like, just trust me. Trust me
Yeah.
on this. He's been
Yep.
that guy for 6 years.
Yep. Yeah, without a doubt. And Shiloh coming in saying, forgot to mention the super chat earlier. Nick's light and camera situation finally looks 4K. Went out and spent good money on a camera. They had a really good deal at, God, I don't even know what the company is. It's the one with the snakes logo. Razer, I think it was. They're
No,
like
the super chats and everything are a big help. That's why we do this.
Yes.
We always want to invest in making our product better when you invest in us. So thank you, Shiloh, for your contributions.
Yeah, thank you so much. I do need to get a USB adapter because now my mouse is rendered useless because I don't have enough ports for everything, but we'll get it. That's fine. Did Ekiyor get drafted? Ekiyor was one of the first announced undrafted free agent players, went to the Colts. From what I heard, Ekiyor was not the most impressive on the whiteboard sessions, which a lot of teams really value for the center stuff, but that's pure hearsay, and sometimes I feel like
He didn't play center in college, did he?
Didn't play center in college either. Nope. So I just don't want to play into any tropes or anything. That's just pure hearsay. Why would somebody like that fall when they did that well at the Senior Bowl? Well, maybe that's the reason why. Maybe the tape at college was not that good. I thought he was okay.
The Senior Bowl is a smaller sample size. He was pretty good at the combine. I would have loved to take a chance on him. Like I said earlier, I would have called him up and said, "What's your best offer? I'll add 20% and bring him in if I needed a center."
Yep. Yeah. So overall, I will say I'm a little bit surprised. So Dane Brugler giving a shout out to Alex Forsyth in that best day 3 pick that should surprise is, I think, a bonus for Alex Forsyth as a player, because Dane Brugler in his beast, the draft thing ranking with like 700 players on it or something, he had JL Skinner as like his 96th player on the board, and the Broncos got him in the 6th round. So JL Skinner, obviously
183.
183. So they got him much later. Now, granted, the torn pectoral totally changes the evaluation. Like, he might not even be ready year 1. He said that he should be ready about a month, 2 months away, but still, you never know with that kind of thing. Also, then because of the torn pec, you don't have all the data to go with it. But he was voted the, I think, defensive back of the Senior Bowl by his own peers out there for his team, whatever side that was, I think the national side. So he was out there. He's a weird player because he's so lanky. I wish he had a little bit more mass on him, but I think he could be your third safety, come down and play the box, maybe be a little bit of tight end stopper. And again, another guy who has some special teams ability. So the Broncos getting a top 100 player, or maybe even a top 120 player at pick, was a 183, something that's good value out there. So Broncos get 26 ranking here. I think, again, it has a lot more to do with the lack of quality picks at the top and the lack of depth overall, but considering they only had 5 picks, pretty darn good overall. So Scott and I are going to have a chance the rest of the week to continue to talk about this. I didn't want to come in and like break down the draft class, because every single podcast article out there is going to have that out there coming forward. But I do want to hear Scott's take more on some of these players as he has some time to get through these. We didn't talk very much about Riley Moss, and might want to break down the press conference a little bit as well, because there were some interesting tidbits in there, and what does everything mean. But overall, Scott, since we're getting on out of here, your final thoughts on this draft class for today. What do you think about how the Broncos did? Some surprises, some guys that we mocked Mims there a bit. I don't think we ever mocked Forsyth or Skinner because they'd go earlier than we had those selections, but that's why the draft is random and wild, right? You never know.
Yeah, I would be real excited to see, like I said, Marvin Mims. We've said before, wide receiver, we really only had 2 wide receivers last year. Patrick comes back and he's healthy, and everybody stays healthy. Maybe you got 3. I don't count on KJ Hamler. I don't think the Broncos are either. That's why you got a 4-3 guy coming in who fits that type of mold. Drew Sanders, athletic linebacker, brings all kinds of I'm repeating myself. I don't like to say it. I say athleticism, but some explosiveness to the position. What I was hoping to see from Jonas Griffith last year before he got hurt. Maybe you double up on there, and now you get some explosiveness from the position. And even if it's Jonas Griffith who beats him out, that's okay, as long as you get that athleticism on the field. We liked Riley Moss a whole lot. He was a little bit like Trayvon Diggs light, where he was big play or big play against. That happened a lot. So, settle that down and get a little more consistency, and he can be really good size, good speed. Coming out of Iowa, he's sound. And then Skinner was a great pick as long as he can stay healthy. It's not a long-term injury. And then Forsyth is let's wait and see see him on the field, because I haven't watched him on the field. I've just seen his testing numbers, and they're not so good. But if you're getting this kind of raving despite the testing, you got to be a player. Like I said, that's how Ben Jones was.
Yeah. Without a doubt. And last comment here, Skinner basically Atwater size, and I see Ben Bruce coming in. JL Skinner can be a Cam Chancellor kind of player. JL Skinner is 6'3", but those two safeties you listed were 20 to 25 pounds heavier than Skinner, or than what Skinner is at like 200, 203. So a little bit different of a body type out there. That's one of the things about Skinner. It just looks kind of odd considering how slender he is. But hopefully he can add some mass. But that's one of the reasons he probably fell like he did, and could be a really fun third safety for the Broncos. So fun player, good ball skills. I hope he does pretty well. What did Cam Chancellor weigh? I know Steve Atwater played at like 225, and Skinner was like 203 weighted there. Cam Chancellor weight, I think he was pretty darn big. Yeah, 230. I mean,
I've got 6 plays from the Senior Bowl. I didn't cut up his video, but I have 6 plays from the Senior Bowl on Skinner. So I'll put those together today. I kind of forgot he was there, honestly. I didn't do there's several guys I was going through. I didn't cut highlights of them. So I'll get some Senior Bowl videos, so we've got it for tomorrow morning.
Yeah, and I got JL Skinner here. I don't care what he was listed at Boise State, but he didn't test, and which means he could be as big as he possibly could, and he weighed at 209. So
Skinner came in at 211 at the Senior Bowl, and I would imagine with his frame, he could put on 10 pounds just by deciding he wanted to put on 10 pounds. He was 211 at the Senior Bowl, so that was end of January. And then at the Combine, which was a month later, Boise State, he was 209.
So a little bit different body type, mass disposition. I don't know what the word is, just how it's filled out there. But he's a rookie, and he's going to have a chance to fill out a little bit more. So it'll be fun. Good draft class overall. A lot of fun today. I thought the Broncos, considering they had limited precious draft capital, I thought they overall maximized almost every single move that they did. Overall, I think it was a good one. My only complaint was, maybe giving 108 and a future third for a cornerback. But hey, if Riley Moss hits, if he keeps taking the ball away like he did at Iowa, playing opposite, if he's a versatile chess piece on the back end, or even a boundary cornerback, that's okay value, especially considering you're not giving up top 50 value. But where the Broncos sit next year, if they have questions at quarterback, edge rusher, and offensive tackle, makes me a little bit worried to only have your first and your third. But I digress.
When the picks turn into players, then you can rejudge what you got. So depending on what Riley Moss does, it doesn't matter what you spent for him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. You have to be right on that one, though. Mm-hmm. But will be interesting to see how it plays out. You guys are great. Thank you so much, everybody, coming in today and contributing to the show. Make sure you guys are following Scott and I on Twitter. Scott is at Scout Kennedy. I'm at Nick Kendell, MHH. Also, make sure you're following us at BFB_pod, as well as at Mile High Huddle. If you haven't done so yet, join us at Facebook.com/Mile High Huddle pod and Facebook.com/Mile High Huddle. Follow us on Instagram at Mile_High_Huddle. Please, if you're joining us after the fact, or you have an Apple Podcast or Spotify, find Mile High Huddle, Huddle Up Podcast on there. Scroll down, leave us a 5-star review and rating. A lot of good Broncos content out there, a lot of good draft content out there, but we like to think that we do it a little bit better and differently than anybody else. So if you have any comments, criticisms, just overall thoughts on the show, Nick looks a lot better now that he has a better camera, new computer. We're upgrading the game. We'd really appreciate that. You can make comments. Scott, I got a lot of comments on the show about, hey, Nick Kendell has hair, because I was not wearing a hat on that. Also, wow, Nick, your forehead might rival Scott's.
I saw that one. Yeah, well, I used to wear like bangs, and then I saw myself on TV one time, and my forehead's so big that my bangs look like a beaver tail hanging down. I'm like, all right, we got to get rid of that.
Yeah, just lean into it. At least you still have hair, right? That's when it starts to be
not bad for my advanced years. My dad didn't have this much hair when he was 30, so
thank God it's a gene that you get on your mom's side then, huh? But subscribe, like, and share also on YouTube if you haven't done so yet. Guys, we got to get growing. You guys all have an awesome one. Hope you do well. And
Troy, you finished top 10. We'll stick around to answer another question. It says, we still owe a fourth for the Martin trade. Can we avoid that by trading him? You might be able to get compensation back, like somebody else's fourth. I don't think you'd be able to get that. But yeah, if you traded a fourth, and unless it was conditional on him making the roster in 2023, then that pick is Gonzalez. Can you trade him and get something back? Maybe. It would probably involve eating some salary because he's pretty well compensated.
Yeah, the Martin trade, we do not know which pick exactly the Broncos are giving up yet for him. We know that it is a 4th-round pick, but the Broncos own their own 4th, and they also have Miami's 4th next year that they got in the Bradley Chubb trade. So right now, both those 4th-round picks are listed on like sites for the Broncos and whatnot, but they will only have one of those at the end of the day. It's just I don't know which one it specifically will be.
Yeah, Tankathon's already updated. So it's 1st round, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 5th, 7th, 7th is what the Broncos have right now.
Which 4th does it say they have? Can you see?
It says the one from Miami.
So that's indicating the Broncos gave up their own 4th-round pick next year in the trade. I've read different things and it's been inconclusive. So we're I'll wait and see on that one. But that's essentially what the Broncos will have: a 1, 3, 4, 5, 7, 7, or whatever it is. We'll see if they add more.
Dialing phone numbers at this point.
Yeah. We'll see if they add more. The Broncos added wide receiver. I know that they were shopping a lot of players throughout the entirety of the draft, and I think now they've kind of pivoted to 2024 draft capital. So let's see if they can add any more of those preciouses to their overall treasures. Yeah, exactly. So guys, have a great one. We will see you again tomorrow morning. Happy May. God, summer's right around the corner, and we're still going to be covering the draft here for a bit. Overall implications. Well, maybe we'll have to cover in the morning shows the other AFC West teams as well. It's because Ernie doesn't always join us in the morning, so he won't get after us for talking about the Chiefs, Chargers, or Raiders as much. But we appreciate you guys. Have a great one. Continue to choose kindness and compassion. Have a great rest of your day. Go Broncos.